MiSTer opportunities. All this and more coming up on This Week in Retro.
High-resolution color graphics.
This land of high technology.
The revolution in technology that made the information age possible.
Those kids are not afraid of computers.
Hawkin FPGA.
Tell us about the console wars, Grandad.
CPC Pee Co.
All this and more coming up on this week's show. Up-to-date news for out-of-date tech. Hello, Dave.
Hello, Neil. Hello, wallpaper.
Oh, yes, I haven't got the green screen today for viewers. I'm back in front of Granny's wallpaper. I make no apologies for it. It's vintage in a way.
You have just let something out the bag, though.
What's that?
Not everyone that watches us will realise that while the background is the real shop in the cave, you don't sit in front of it as a green screen.
I don't sit in front of it for the podcast, no.
Fake. It's fake.
Well, anyone who's seen the trickery that Duncan does on me will soon realise that there was a green screen there. Actually, in all the areas of the cave, the fake shop is the worst place to record because the echo is just horrendous. Even with the walls lined with games, you'd think that would dampen it. But no. If I ever record in there, I got to do so much post-processing on the voice.
Is it because the games are in plastic? Is that why? If they were just in cardboard, they might be different.
Maybe. I don't know. It's just the acoustics are just terrible. Anyway, Dave, I was listening to podcasts this week, as I do. And who should pop up but you on Ian Lee's podcast, Random Access Memories.
Oh, did I ruin it for you? Were you all looking forward to it and then said,
yeah.
Oh, it's Dave?
No, I did enjoy it. I enjoyed it. How was it for you?
It was over in a flash. Yeah. No sooner had I got talking to Ian than the 30 minutes was up. But I think that's how he likes to do it. He likes to, for these things, he likes to make sure it doesn't go on too long. You're better off leaving people wanting more than doing too much.
I liked how you are familiar enough with his format that you know the game is kind of irrelevant. It's more about you. So in the first 10 seconds, you held the game up. You were going to get that game in.
Yeah. Even if I only got to speak about it for about 2 minutes, which is what I did, I still love the game. It's Dungeon Master, by the way. I absolutely love the game. One of the most important games for me. In fact, I'm going to mention it today, in fact.
Okay, right. Well, if you're looking for even more podcasting after this episode, look up Random Access Memories. I think you are episode 16 because Ian did a first series and then took a break and enthused once again by retro. He's back into it, and I'm looking forward to seeing. I think Holly might be a guest. Are we allowed to reveal that?
Well, we just have. I know that she's a guest. Yeah, it was Aaron, Amigo Aaron last week.
Yeah, Aaron. Yes, yeah.
He was put on because they wanted to promote Amigathon, which was a roaring success.
It was. How much did they raise?
I can't remember.
It was just over $5,000. Their goal was $5,000. And they broke that, so they did very well.
There's always more money trickles in afterwards as well, so that's not the final.
Yeah. So well done to Amigos Retro Gaming. This week, I'm going to ask for people's opinions because I bought something this week and 90% of the reviews say it's absolute snake oil, poppycock, but I thought I'd try it anyway because I work really late at night sometimes doing my editing, and using screens late at night often leads to bad sleep patterns. So instead of going to bed early, I thought I'll try blue light blocking glasses. Here they are. I'll pop them on. Look a bit like Anne Robinson with them on. So that, in theory...
What colour's my T-shirt?
Still blue. It's not blocking the blue, Dave.
Neil, can you get a refund still? I'm
going to see if that reduces fatigue. But has anyone else tried it? Is it complete nonsense? Am I just looking like a wally by putting them on? Or
were they expensive?
Does it help you? Oh, no. They weren't the cheapest because I saw the cheapest and thought that's probably just not doing anything at all. Which is probably just a complete fool's game. Yeah, I'll pay more for the snake oil because then it would be better snake oil.
They have done trials on placebos, and expensive placebos work better than cheap ones. Blue placebos work better. 2 placebos work better than 1.
Yeah, there you go. It gets me.
I've just checked. An Amigathon current total is $6,433. Dollar bills.
Oh, they've gone over 6,000. Well done. And where does that all go to?
That'll go to Children's Miracle Network Hospital.
Fantastic. Other things I've been doing this week, I've been eBaying. I always find the Christmas period is a great time to eBay because people take their eye off the ball and there are bargains to be had. Last year, I think I got some Neo Geo stuff really cheap. This year, no Neo Geo stuff to be had. I did get Police Quest 2 for my Sierra big box collection for £28, including delivery, which is pretty good for these Sierra games. Paid a little bit more than that, £40, including delivery for the first Leisure Suit Larry. I had to get that in my collection. Both of these you'll be pleased to hear, Dave, on the Atari ST.
Yeah, good platform.
I managed to pick up another Amiga format issue 1.
So you got 2 now?
I've got 3, but now 2, because it was a bundle of 3 magazines that was badly listed and just happened to have Amiga format issue 1. So it was 0 issue 1, the 1 issue 2, and Amiga format issue 1 for £30 in one bundle.
So 0, 1, 1, 2...
AF1.
Yeah.
And I couldn't have 3 issue 1 Amiga formats. And do you remember one of the ones I had pen marks all over? Mm-hmm. The one I paid the most for. We've talked about it on the show. So I gave
the sealed one, the brand new sealed in bag, untouched by human hands.
Exactly. Ridiculous. So I've given that one to the amazing
Did that come from the same guy that sold you the blue glasses?
Yeah, actually, the pen was all blue, so maybe that was the fix. There you go. Sorry about the blue pen all over the £100 magazine, but if you pop these glasses on, everything will be fine. So yeah, I've sent the spare one to the amazing Pillock, who is going to help me with, because this year is the 40th year of the Amiga, the original Amiga 1000, as it went on to be. So we're going to do an Amiga exhibition at the Cave, and he's going to help me fill in some of the blanks, things like Tower, an Amiga 3000, which I don't have, so we can do a really nice Amiga display. Will you come and see it, Dave?
Yes. Yes.
And finally, I bought the Secret Missions expansion pack for Wing Commander because somebody very kindly donated several beautiful boxes of Wing Commander games to the Cave recently. So we've got a nice Wing Commander display. And now that's enthused me just to fill in some of the gaps. The Secret Missions pack. Wing Commander 2, I've got on a compilation box, but I need to get the standalone. So I'm looking for Wing Commander 2 at the moment, which commands quite a high price. It is Wing commanding quite a high price, Dave. You're going to pull it off your shelf there now, aren't you? There it is. That's the one I want. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you want this one? Because you can't have it.
Oh.
Very heavy, Neil. Very heavy.
Yeah.
It's a lot in the box.
It's a quality box, quality contents. Look at all those discs. How many discs for that game?
14.
14, because this is the era of speeching games.
Yeah.
But not everyone's quite got a CD drive yet. So forcing it onto floppy disks. So that's been my eBaying recently. Dave, pay attention, Dave. He's getting sucked into the contents of Wing Commander 2. That's the danger of these boxes, isn't it?
I've been looking into something interesting. You know Glenn, CRG?
I do.
He did a video where he had an old IBM computer and he brought it back and he looked at what was on the hard disk. And normally you don't see anything that's really particularly interesting. And just by chance, it happened to be the computer that was run by a store selling computer games.
Oh, fantastic. So did it
So
have...
they had a database of games on it. And one of the games on it was this compilation here,
I
10
remember them
computer
well.
hits. Yeah, 10 computer hits, 5 it was, which I don't have. But I really like these because I bought these for my Amstrad back in the day. It was 10 games which were, you'd fancy 2 or 3 of them, and they'd put a few ringers in there that were terrible games. But there's a lot of good games in there. Sacred Armor of Anteriad, Herbert's Dummy Run.
They were good compilations, and they mimicked some of the music compilations, didn't they, in their style of the artwork, rather than looking like a video game.
Yeah,
it didn't look out of place in our price next to the music.
So I'm watching his video, and this came up and was like, I've got that. I went and got it.
Yeah. So was that your impression of Glenn there?
No, I got that on my shelf.
I got that, so I have. And then what else was in the database? Did he go through it in detail? I'm going to have to watch this
There
now.
was a few other games, but that's all I got so far. I think he might do more on that because he wasn't. That wasn't the purpose of the video. It was to get things working. He got it working, had a quick look, and then saw something and thought, "Is that a computer game?" And yes, it is.
Fantastic. Well, maybe you can include the link for Duncan to put in the show notes so people can check that video out.
Maybe I could.
Maybe you could. Maybe you will. Depends how nice you're feeling today, Dave. Anything else you want to talk about pre-show?
Fetch me the butter. More on that later. If there was ever a console or micro that came so close to really making its mark, but didn't quite make it, what would you say it was, Neil?
Ooh. Well, this could lead us into a region trap, Dave, because I could say the Sega Saturn because of its sales performance here in the UK, but that would be ignoring its massive success in Japan. Could say the same about the PC Engine. So where something has flopped internationally, there's usually good reason for it. So, for example, the Jaguar with its awful games library. I don't think there's any region where that magically did well. Not that I know of, but feel free to correct me if someone is all about the Jaguar in their part of the world. So I'm going to go with a handheld if that's allowed. To this day, I love the Atari Lynx, and with a modern display, it is absolutely brilliant. If technology had been a little bit more advanced, a bit less power hungry, then I truly believe, because it came out in the same year, the Atari Lynx would have trounced the Game Boy, but it just wasn't quite there. And it is a good system. Lynx.
I think that's fair enough. The Game Boy had the whole casual thing. It was easy, nailed down. You switched it on, the batteries last a long time, and the games were just ideal for 20 minutes on a train. I thought about the consoles that didn't make it, but should have done better. So the GX4000 was too little, too late. That's the Amstrad GX4000. The Atari XEGS was stupid, and the C64GS was much worse, much later. Both terrible ideas. The Atari Jaguar, it does have a few compelling games, but I feel that we look hard to find those and bring them out just to say it had a few compelling games. The reality is it didn't have enough, and it suffered.
A lot of the good ones, like Alien versus Predator, they came very early in its life, and then everyone just kind of gave up on it and just got rubbish.
It suffered from lazy 68K ports, but not so much as the CD32 suffered from lazy 68K ports. Horrendous rip-offs in CD32 games, for the most part just being Amiga games chucked onto a CD in the hope that people wouldn't notice. Of course they did. The Amiga CD32 failed as a result. The Konix multi-system was going to go down the PC Engine route of very powerful coprocessors run by a relatively weak CPU, but it didn't make it to market.
And a spinning seat.
Yes, all the rest of that. Despite all the excitement, it didn't make it to market. The Sega 32X didn't make many ripples. The Philips CDI didn't revolutionize the living room. The Apple Pippin landed after the PlayStation, more expensive and worse without the PlayStation support. The Nuon, that's the DVD-based sort of gaming system, didn't make it. We could argue about the Saturn and the Dreamcast. Maybe should be on this list, but I don't think they should. I don't think we will argue because of what you said. You don't agree they should be on the list. I don't think they should be on the list. They weren't massive successes, but they were a success.
Coming back to your original question, they made their mark.
Yeah,
they really did.
Yeah. And people talk about the Dreamcast with dreamy eyes these days.
The Dreamcast's game library wasn't that small. It did have a good, solid library of quality games, and it was great for a couple of years until Sega gave up on it. Yeah.
Yeah. It just wasn't the PlayStation, though. So where does that leave us? Obviously, it leaves us with what I think might be the last big core on the MiSTer platform before we have to move on to bigger FPGA chips to get big cores on it. I can't delay it any longer. Surely everyone knows that by now it's Mr. EA's project, the real bad guy from Ultima 6, Trip Hawkins 3DO. A 32-bit ARM processor using RISC with a custom graphics chip. The 3DO was a CD-ROM-based multimedia powerhouse. Unlike most other projects, it wasn't just tied to one manufacturer. Panasonic, Goldstar, Sanyo, even Creative putting on PCs on cards, and American Laser Games putting it in arcade cabinets.
Yeah, so just to give some context, it was 1993 the 3DO came out, and the idea, bless you, Dave, was to license out the technology rather than produce it themselves so that anyone could make it, and they expected to see all kinds of brands sat under our TVs just like VHS players of the time.
As far as the failure is concerned, it is a failure. It didn't quite make it in terms of sales. I don't think anyone made money on it. And the upgraded M2 for it failed to make it to market. But calling it just a failure is unfair. For 2 years, until the PlayStation landed, I think the PlayStation just killed off any chances it had at that point. Until the PlayStation landed, it was a great system with some great games, but people just wouldn't buy it because it wasn't a big enough success.
And actually, the impact of the PlayStation was hitting it long before the PlayStation even came out, because Sony were teasing and teasing and teasing so much about that system that everyone was just hanging on. Okay, let's just wait and see. And then, of course, the announcement of the price of the PlayStation.
Yeah.
And that affected the Saturn in the UK. Even though the Saturn came to market first, they'd done so much groundwork on the marketing of the PlayStation. It just killed it.
I mean, Sony had the option to get into the 3DO, but they looked at it, and they looked at it really carefully and decided, no, we're not going to do it.
But we'll take the good bits.
Right. Yeah. And they clearly learned when they made the PlayStation. The 3DO launched at $700 US, pricing most people out. I think people still wanted it, but they just weren't willing to pay that for it. I don't think it was a case people looked at it and said, this is trash. It was, I'm not paying $700 for this. They continually dropped the price, though. And they were always a step behind what they needed to be with the price for it to catch on. Had they dropped the price harder and faster, I always think it would have caught on. If they had launched at, I don't know, $350, maybe it would have caught on at that point and stopped the decline. But the truth is, there's actually lots to play on it. It got 200 games in its life. And for the most part, those games were decent stuff. I mean, Starblade, which is a kind of Star Wars on rails game. And if you want real Star Wars, then Rebel Assault got a great port to the 3DO.
Oh, interesting. You mentioned Starblade, because just this week I was talking about it on a forum. The question in this forum was, name an arcade cabinet that made your jaw drop back in the day. And for me, there was a sitting cockpit version of Starblade at my local arcade. And the arcade, once you sat in there, uses a great big concave mirror for the display, which made it really feel like you were in infinite space. It gave it this sort of stereo, gave it depth. It gave it just width and a massiveness, a feel to this game that was really cool and totally impossible to recreate at home. So yes, there is a good 3DO version, but then it just becomes another on-rails space shooter. It doesn't have that incredible effect of the arcade.
Yeah, it's still a good on-rail space shooter. I like them. I mean, the original Star Wars, I didn't realize as a kid was an on-rail shooter. It does really well. The Vector one, at fooling you into thinking you're steering the ship. You kind of are a bit in parts, but really you're on an on-rail shooter. Gex, which is their Mario or Sonic, which is a wee lizard that I really like the look of. I like him much better than the Hedgehog or the Plumber. Need for Speed is an excellent racer. It's a bit into the sim category, and it uses the C-ROM well. And if you want something a bit more arcadey, then there's Road Rash, and that's fantastic on it.
Those original Need for Speed games are nothing like what they turned into post. What was the movie? What's the movie with Vin Diesel?
Riddick.
Yeah, that's post Riddick.
They calls it Riddick.
You know what I mean. Fast and Furious. Fast and Furious. As soon as that happened,
family.
Need for Speed became a totally different thing.
Street Fighter 2 Turbo was great on it, I'm told. I don't like the game, I'm not a fan, but it looks fantastic, and it blasts all the other consoles out of the water. Killing Time is a shooter with some interesting twists that I've been meaning to play for years, although I've been tending playing it on the PC, never get around to it. Of course, FIFA, if you're in North America, or Madden, FIFA if you're not in North America usually, and Madden if you are in North America, two big sports games on it. I think the first 3D FIFA was on that. So Sergei Zvonenko which I'm sure I pronounced incorrectly, my apologies, a prolific MiSTer developer has progressed quite far into making his core before making it public. There's still lots of work to do, but it looks pretty clear this core is indeed coming to MiSTer. So we're going to get 3DO on the MiSTer that when you covered it 5.5 years ago, we were told we're not going to get anything like that. It's coming to the MiSTer as it is just now on the project without any hardware requirements more than what's there already.
Fantastic. Yeah. I mean, the 3DO is a system that really is worth exploring. It's more than just the FMV gimmickry that we maybe saw with the CDI. It does actually have some grunt. What first impressed me was Need for Speed, which you mentioned there, or the Chronicles of Riddick's car, which I saw in a demo unit in a shop. And when I saw it, it had proper texture mapped 3D. It had a car that you could do donuts in. So it wasn't just a sprite. The car could face the other way. There was smoke kicked up and you were in the smoke. It was brilliant at the time. And it wasn't until I had a 486 DX266 PC, the godlike DX266 that everyone wanted back in that period. That was when I had a PC that could actually run Need for Speed and match the experience of a 3DO. And that was a PC that cost way more than a 3DO's price tag would. So give it its due. It was a powerful machine. It wasn't just a multimedia PC. It had some grunt there. Likewise with FIFA, which, as you said, was the first 3D version of the FIFA game. The players were still sprites, but the stadium was 3D. Did it have commentary? I feel like it had commentary. I think it did. And the game, 2D sprites, but it played out in a 3D space. Road Rash, brilliant. Alone in the Dark, yes, we had that on our PCs, but there's a good version of it on the 3DO. Return Fire, great little 2-player strategy game. Had the best version. Don't downplay Street Fighter 2 on it, Dave. It had parallax scrolling.
Parallax scrolling?
Yeah, stick that in your pipe, SNES owners of the day. It had Wing Commanders. It had Wing Commander 3. It had Super Wing Commander with support for a really gorgeous CH flight stick, an analog stick made just for the 3DO, which I've got. And I can tell you, if I sit down and play Wing Commander on the 3DO with a flight stick, it blows away anything the Mega Drive or Super Nintendo could do at the time. And it is right up there with the quality of the PC game, the way it feels. Wonderful versions of it. There's a stunning version of Another World, which adds, what's that called in America? Out of This World, you might know it as, which adds additional artwork to the backdrops, beautiful watercolor painted backdrops to make that game even more stunning than it already is. That's worth a look. Yes, there are FMV games like Dragon's Lair. Yes, there are light gun games that use FMV like Mad Dog. What are you laughing at, Dave? You're laughing at Mad Dog.
Mad Dog McCree just makes me laugh.
Someone should turn Dragon's Lair into a light gun game. Just shoot Dirk. So yeah, the 3DO is worlds apart from something like the Atari Jaguar's library. Also Starfighter 3000. Have you ever played that one?
Nope.
So that was an Acorn Archimedes game.
Really?
And the original developers ported it. Yeah, Starfighter. They ported it because, of course, it was a RISC processor in the 3DO, and that was the great thing about the Archimedes. So you weren't going to get lazy ports from 68,000 based machines like the Jaguar. We got some ports from the Archimedes, which didn't have, a huge library of games suitable for porting to a console. But there was never the risk of getting tons and tons of Amiga games to a CD32 or, ST games to a Jaguar or Amiga games to a Jaguar, as happened. So I'm really pleased to see that this is in development. It's the last, or is it the last great core for the current MiSTer hardware? There are plenty of arcade platforms out there yet to be ported. If you look at the arcades and the systems on MAME and the support that has compared to MiSTer, there is tons and tons and tons more games that can be ported to MiSTer hardware. And some of those arcades use a shared powerful platform. So maybe there's some more greatness to come, but greatness is subjective. It's difficult. But the 3DO is definitely notable in its absence of what you could do on a MiSTer. So that itself says something.
I definitely don't want to give the impression that it's all finished for MiSTer and there's nothing left. That's not the case, but this is a huge, huge core to come to it. There are other cores that I'm sure that will come, other consoles or micros that aren't there yet that will come, but nothing will come with a games library like the 3DO.
And also those bigger systems well, they will demand more gates, a bigger FPGA chip.
Yeah.
That's what you mean. So there is plenty more to come for MiSTer, but in its current form, I get what you mean.
Don't expect it any time immediately, but it is definitely on the horizon. The developer's quite modest with what he says about it, but it is further along than he makes it sound. So I think we'll see it maybe even this year. So I'm really excited to see that come.
We are sponsored this week by our good friends at PCBWay.com, the place to go for anything PCB, whether it's designing, manufacturing PCBs, 3D printing, all of the rest of it. And of course, our favorite part of PCBWay.com, the shared projects website. And I've been having a browse this week, and what pops out for me, Dave,
what
right
pops
there,
out for you? Is it blue
out?
light glasses?
No, it's not. I'm not going to live that down. Ready to put straight in my basket and order is the Summer Cart 64, a fully open source N64 game flash cart. I'm going to get one for the cave. And that's right there in the shared projects, open source, ready to order and get delivered with also 3D printed cartridge shell case to go with it as well.
Why is it called Summer?
I don't know why it's called Summer, but one of the things that annoys me is when you get these projects and then you've just got a bare PCB hanging out the side of
hanging at the back, no.
an Amstrad or a C64 or whatever. So, of course, because it's PCBWay.com, you can also get the cartridge shell to come to you if you don't own a 3D printer yourself. So check that out. Have you spotted anything, Dave, or do you want to say anything wonderful about PCBWay.com?
They sponsor us, and that's wonderful.
That is wonderful.
I'm always amazed by the shared projects. I won't browse it, though, just now because I'm too busy with stuff, and I'll end up finding something that will distract me. No, thank you very much for sponsoring us, PCBWay.
The museum where grandparents can get their tech cred back is the headline of an article submitted by TAC Redditing this week. Thank you for submitting that. And if you want to submit stories for us to consider, it's reddit.com/r/thisweekinretro, where it all happens. This article is published by The Age in Australia. And once I figured out I needed a VPN to Oz to actually read it rather than get stuck behind a paywall, I did indeed enjoy reading it. It's the news that a new museum has recently opened in Melbourne, which is called the National Communications Museum. It opened in September, and it's based on in a repurposed 1930s telephone exchange. This museum combines traditional stand back and look style exhibits, including the famous Enigma machine from World War II for code breaking, and the history of the country and indeed the world becoming more connected. That's all pretty standard fare for a museum of this type. And then it's also got a second area, which is a hands-on area with interactive exhibits ranging from typewriters to, I like how in the article it calls them Walkmans, because the plural of a Walkman is not Walkmen, it's Walkmans.
Yeah, it doesn't sound right, the Walkmans.
Doesn't sound right, does it? No. It doesn't type right. Walkmans, PCs, PCs with Doom, and a recreated BBS service to dial into with an Amiga 500. It's a museum that I'll likely never get to visit, being on the other side of the world, but you never know. Fingers crossed I might get there one day. But I did enjoy it vicariously through the pictures in the article. And the pictures highlight a real passion has gone into building this. The displays look beautifully laid out. It looks like a very spacious museum. I'm not jealous at all by the huge amounts of space you have in Australia. Damn, it looks beautiful. And in that space, they've filled it without overfilling it. There's a great use of lighting, display methods. The kit that's in there, like there was a really minty looking Amiga 500, not just anyone, one with a red power light, one of the earlier models. Gorgeous Commodore CRT complementing it. It really does look like it's all been chosen by people that really care about it. One of those people is Emily Siddons, the museum's co-CEO and artistic director. Can you imagine that, Dave, having your own artistic director? Oh, what I wouldn't do for that in the cave. I've got Dan, though. I've got Dan. He's quite artistic. So in the article, Emily explains that the displays they're meant to be conversation starters, and they're meant to speak to visitors' shared histories, to their childhood experiences. And the whole thing is meant to be a way for generations to bond through their experiences and through a shared visit, which is something I do see happen at the arcade and at the cave when people, if you lay things out in such a way that they're not just expected to stand in front of it, read it, move on to the next thing, move on to the next thing, give them the space to play it.
This is a Roman pot from such and such. Yeah.
Here's what I used to play. Look at the joystick. Isn't it funny? All that stuff. It really does open up conversations, and they've got this bang on. And this week it's the news of that museum's opening and of hearing about the ethos behind it. And I think we're really heading into a new era where finally, microcomputer and console history is getting the respect it deserves, not just by the hobbyists and the enthusiasts, but by the city planners, the people who hold the purse strings to the grants, the established museum world, as seen also in current exhibitions such as at the London Science Museum. You've got their Power Up exhibit. I haven't been to that. I can't speak for the quality of it, but I know that they're putting it on at the moment. Is it wishful thinking on my part, Dave, that we're entering a new era? Is it that a light is being shone on video game and home computer history in this way, in a way that perhaps it hasn't been before? Is something happening here, or am I just getting excited?
I think you're right. I think video games have been a dirty little secret for a while, as if you can show a museum for computers, but if you put games in it, then it's not right. It has to be a games exhibition or no games at all, as if they're not a legitimate use of computers, as if that's a frivolous thing they shouldn't be used for. So I'm pleased to see that's starting to fade away. The gaming industry, as far as I know, is the largest creative industry in the world. It's massive. It's absolutely giant. And I think the size of it now warrants people looking back at the 80s and 90s, or even the 70s, to see it develop and say, well, this is the tiny seed that blossomed into what the giant industry is now, and gives it a bit of legitimacy. So I'm pleased to see a museum like this has a bit of games in it. And it's not a case of we can't have games in it. They don't belong here. The new Spectrum Doco, the rubber-keyed wonder.
Okay, mate.
When that came out, the BBC covered it, and they covered it. They covered it without being a bit childish, without being the normal looking down their nose at games thing.
Okay.
And when you were on the BBC as well, they were speaking about it reasonably fondly without just doing the normal, it's only games thing. So I think attitudes are changing.
It was better, certainly, when I last spoke to them, but there's always that element of them it's tempting for them to just be lazy. Like every single time I've been on the BBC, it always starts off with Pac-Man's music.
Yeah. Well, we talked about that's what we talked about last week, the whole boiling down things to arcade machines or Pac-Man and Space Invaders and all the rest of it.
Yeah. We have seen more in-depth documentaries like Rubber Keyed Wonder and The Amiga Years. Those were both by Anthony and Nicola Caulfield, who have, I think it's fair to say, gained a reputation for making these things very well. And we know about them because they move in our niche. They pop up at expos. We see them on our carefully curated retro social media feeds. We see them about a lot. But beyond that, their Bedroom to Billions doco, for example, is available and did make it into the Sky Store, which is more mainstream. So that's positive. More of that, please. And there have been some on Netflix, like High Score is a docuseries that's been on there recently. But then we do start to touch on something that we talked about last week, which is these stories being painted from the perspective of those with the loudest voices and the best connections to platforms like Netflix. So I think Netflix, give us a docuseries which is just the history of video games from around the world. You get travel shows, you get presenters going all around the world, trying out cuisine all around the world. Let's do the same, but finding out the history of video games and computers around the world. Dave?
But don't sex it up. Don't feel you need to add drama and nonsense into it. The stories themselves are compelling enough. We talked about Halt and Catch Fire on here, the TV series that I stopped watching because I thought was rubbish, because it was loosely thrown in PC stuff along with love triangles and all the rest of that drama stuff that I thought, this isn't real. No one would believe this nonsense. So keep it real.
Keep it real. And that goes to every facet of the hobby as well. There was on BBC Radio recently there was like a musical series about video game music, and every advert, every part of it was, here's Mario, here's Sonic.
Yeah.
You've got people like Chris Abbott who have hired entire orchestras to cover Sid Chip music, to cover Rob Hubbard's back catalogue, and people like that. Come on, let's tap into that. Let's share that with the world more and more. Please do. So we're veering off course a little bit there. So let's get back to museums. It is really great to see this one pop up. If you're in the area, take a trip to Hawthorne in Melbourne or near Melbourne, somewhere in the Melbourne area. Sorry about my Australian geography. Check it out. Let us know what it's like. Come to the subreddit or into our Discord chat room, discord.gg/RMC Retro. Come and chat. Tell us about it. Take some pictures. Show us more about it. Maybe you'll bump into Chris and the Shane while you're there, if you're lucky.
Dave's Housekeeping.
I'd like to welcome 2 new patrons to the swelling ranks of twirlers. So thank you very much to Edward and to James Patrick for signing up as official patrons, official twirlers. If you'd like to join them, you can go to http
Don't forget the W's.
//www patreon.com/thisweekinretro.
You missed the dot.
Dot.
Where is Dot today?
I don't know. Johnny's here. Oh, Dot's up there. Dot's up on top of the 1701 Commodore monitor.
If you ever get another cat, you've got to call it www. www. Dot. Then you need another one called com.
Call you colon, will I, Johnny? There's been a few comments about the Glasgow Barras, which is the market that I used to go to as a kid for my pirate games, a massive market, including one on Twitter from Arcade Odysseus, who writes a blog about his travels around playing arcade machines. There's a blog entry about Glasgow, which he talks about in a bit of detail about the experience in the Barras.
Are there any pictures in that blog from back in the day or not?
There are a few pictures in the blog, yeah.
I'm going to check that out because I saw Pajako, who was with us last week, post some pictures in Discord of some new books that had been released. One that hadn't been released. One was just on display at EAG, which is the annual arcade expo. And one book, it was a book of carpet cuttings from arcades. So it was like, when you go to buy some carpet, they give you the book and you can choose your piece of carpet. But it was all old carpet from old arcades, which I thought was fantastic. And another book which was just filled with pictures from arcades back in the day. And I'm going to look into that and see if I can figure out how to stock it at the cave. So, yeah, that blog is right up my street.
There were a few arcade machines that I'd forgotten about in the Barras, but of course I was going in for Atari ST games.
Yeah.
On to briefs, and Dr. Local lets us know that you can now play Doom in a PDF file. Pointless, but amazing. The pinkies are grey, though, because it's all in monochrome.
A warning now, printed in your computer back in the day by Don F. Gordon from Sheffield, who says, ignore Kathleen Peel's advice to use butter as lubricant for your Sinclair printer. Use Vaseline instead. Thank you to Doodad P for the heads up on our subreddit.
An important message there, yeah. Vaseline. I'm not even sure if Vaseline's the best thing to use. I don't see it doing any harm, though.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, white lithium grease, perhaps.
Yeah, silicone.
Yeah.
Now, I think I knew this one. Did you know it, Neil? The origin of the word patch goes back to when punched cards were used as a way to instead of discs or tape, and to correct a mistake on the paper, they stuck paper tape over the punches, getting rid of any of the punches and then allowing you to put new punches on it. Did you know that?
Up a hole.
I'm sure I knew that.
It's not a stretch to figure it out, but I don't think I'd ever thought of it. You know, you've got stories like the first bugs were actual bugs.
Yeah.
But yeah, it makes total sense. Patch it up, use it again.
Lord Borac submitted an image from the Smithsonian Archives.
Stop killing games. the remaster. The petition here, it seemed it might go somewhere in the last Parliament with the change of government here in the UK. It was then abandoned. So a new petition has come out. If you're in the UK, you can go and sign it. It's important to preserve video games, as we always talk about here, and stop the practices that make them unavailable to us. Commander Coder, who submitted it to us, says that if we don't do this, then retro, the enjoyment of retro and vintage gaming will remain as pre-2012. Nothing beyond that date will survive if steps aren't taken to make sure we can still access games once their online systems, their servers have gone down. So go and sign the petition. I'm going to do that right now.
Can you run Doom on a beer can, Neil?
On a beer can?
Beer can. Is that your Jamaican accent?
That was, yeah. I've never tried it, Dave. No. Well, yes, I have.
You
Doom
can't.
Bar. Doom Bar.
Oh, Doom Bar. Oh, okay. The Wednesday 1867 links us to a Doom-themed can of what's called Imperial Stout. I don't know what Imperial Stout is. I know what Stout is. It's called Cacodemon 2 Hell on Earth, and it has lovely Doom stuff all over it. A warning though, it's 12% by volume, so a 6-pack of these is likely to be your own Doom. I found it online at £10.50 a can. Oof. Would you pay a tenner a pint, Neil?
Only if it activates God mode.
Yeah, well,
or no clipping.
By volume, it will.
Manx Nick, a special thank you to Manx Nick before I read this out, because he sent me a Christmas card. I got it first day I went back to the cave after Christmas. It was waiting for me on the doormat. So thank you to Manx Nick and family. He suggests a topic to discuss. It belongs in a museum. Stories about fortuitous finds. He has his own story about, by chance, driving past someone as they were putting an Amiga 1200 in the bin and finding a whole lot of other stuff. Actually, I've pulled a Super Nintendo out of the bin in the past. I used to have a shared bin at the back of a flat I lived in Chard in Somerset. And one day I opened the bin to put my rubbish in. Super Nintendo sat there. Of course, I took it in, let it dry, plugged it in, and it worked absolutely fine. So yes, we like stories like that, and we may come back to that suggestion for our question of the week later today.
Mr. Lurch is back. You'll remember He was on here recently talking about how he is back in the hobby after a sort of burnout where he found that the YouTube side of things had become overwhelming and realised he'd stopped having fun. Welcome back, Mr. Lurch. Jason, it's great to see you on the screen again.
Welcome back.
There is loads more on the subreddit, and if you want to join in the discussion there, go to
http
reddit.com/r/thisweekinretro, reddit.com/r/thisweekinretro, where you can submit stories, read the submissions, add comments, have a little chat. We started off today talking about the 3DO, a console which didn't quite get there, although it spent a couple of years almost making it. And now we're going to move on to a micro that did make it, even though it had a mountain to climb, and it came to market after all of the other successful 8-bit micros had established themselves. The Amstrad CPC is the micro that I grew up with, and the one that producer Duncan grew up with, and of course the one that Neil grew up with. Mm-hmm. It arrived quite late to the market in April 1984, and that makes, I guess, Christmas time we've had there is the kind of 40th anniversary of loads and loads of people getting the CPC for their Christmas as kids. There's a real close link to the 3DO here, though, and I'm not sure if everyone realises that Trip Hawkins is no fool, and when he thought up the 3DO, he realised that it needed to hit the ground running. You can't release a console and expect people to buy it when there's nothing to play on it. But the other side of the problem is that how do you convince developers to make something for a platform that hasn't established itself yet? And that's where Atari and Commodore both failed with the CD32 and the Jaguar, because they didn't have enough killer app software at launch for people to say, I need to get this, I have to get it. Now, Trip Hawkins solved that by making the platform appealing, by bringing in several hardware developers, and of course, also by attaching his own reputation and of course EA's, and making sure that that made it onto the console. But Alan Sugar did it with Amstrad nearly 10 years earlier. But Sugar had no reputation in the games market, and Amstrad had never produced any computers before. What Amstrad famously did is to start their own software label, and they weren't the first to do this, but they splashed the cash on buying in a fairly large amount of middle-of-the-road, or maybe not quite middle-of-the-road games, but also utilities, so that the CPC could launch with a fairly diverse amount of software. Now, AmsRaw, AmsBase, Amstrad's Control Purchase Ledger, AmsCalc, AmsWorld, even Forth and Pascal, Pitman Typing Tutor, and others.
Enough serious software to allow us to convince our parents that it was about more than just games.
Yes, that as well.
That was important.
Also, in the launch year, 40 games in total, which is a fair amount to get out on there, just from Amsoft. And other developers were already developing it that way. Neil, I can't think off the top of my head what other 8-bit micros launched after or at the same time as the CPC that actually successfully caught on. The Bee, the Spectrum, the Apple II, the C64, the Atari 8-bit, the MSX, they all launched before. The Coco, they all launched before. And lots of 8-bits came out at the same time and failed. See various episodes from you on the Cave for that.
Yeah, I mean, everything about me wants to scream, well, the PC Engine, the NES, the Sega Master System, they all came out after the Amstrad CPC and they're all 8-bit, but the consoles you specifically have asked for micros.
Yeah.
So what have we got that came out after the CPC? The ZX Spectrum Plus 2?
Doesn't count.
It's difficult, isn't it? Because the big hitters have already established themselves. And also, you've then quickly afterwards got the Atari ST is convincing everyone that their next move will be a 16-bit machine. Yeah. Maybe not the Atari. Maybe they don't know which one it will be yet. But they are convinced in just the same way that people saw the 3DO and said, yes, my next console is going to be all singing, all dancing. It's going to be a 3D powerhouse. But let's just wait and see what comes around. It could be the 3DO, but it could be that PlayStation I've heard about. It could be that Saturn. So, it's very difficult for a micro to get traction after that period. We did get things like the Sam Coupe, which arrived in 1989, didn't stand a chance coming to market. Yes, great machine. Yes, great library because it's got backwards compatibility with the ZX Spectrum. But by this point, the Amiga 500's out, the Atari ST's there. It's all about 16 or even 32-bit machines. So anyone coming to market after 1984 when the Amstrad CPC had hit it, they were always going to struggle. As always, with the caveat of if you're in a different region of the world, maybe you were slightly behind those release schedules. Maybe something came in your part of the world. As always, leave a comment. Let us know if there's an 8-bit machine we've forgotten about that really gained traction post-Christmas 1984. Let us know.
So I can't say that Tripp studied the CPC to learn how to do the 3DO. I'm not sure at all he would need to because he knows what he needed to do. But there's definitely a link because Sugar knew what he needed to do and he made it happen for the CPC when no one else could. And then that's what the 3DO tried and almost succeeded to do. The CPC's unique selling point, though, was that Alan Sugar had managed to obtain and produce monitors, actually really good monitors, at a really decent price, and was able to sell the CPC with a monitor for roughly the same price, and I think this was intentional, as any other micro, including the ZX Spectrum, the budget one, plus the cost of a black and white telly for the CPC green screen package, or the colour TV for the colour CPC package, meaning if you were buying one of these for your kids for Christmas, you get the CPC if they didn't have a TV already, or the Spectrum if they did, because you would have to have bought a TV along with any other micro for them.
So you had these hierarchies. You had Spectrum owner, you had green screen Amstrad owner, you had color screen Amstrad owner, that was me, and then you had like the real posh knobs, the real snooty posh knobs who had an Amstrad CPC 6128.
Like this guy here. Yeah, the 6128 came with a built-in disk drive. It's a 3-inch disk drive, in fact. And I was able to use my Multiface 2 to buy budget games for $1.99 or $2.99 and then save them to disk. So I had the benefit of instant loading, well, near instant loading on the disk rather than the tapes.
You forget that is how it felt. Like the jump from tape to disc felt like instant loading. And people always, when we get talking about Amigas, just to completely turn a Amstrad topic into an Amiga topic. Well, when we talk about it, I jump from the Amstrad to the Amiga, and we talk about all the upgrades that are available for the Amiga, in particular the hard drives and what a difference it makes.
Yeah.
And when I think back to the day, it never once crossed my mind to get a hard drive for my Amiga because the jump from cassette tape to disc had been so phenomenal that this is as quick as it gets. This is quick for me. I'm not, until we started to get to Monkey Islands and massive, multi-disc games.
Yeah,
it was phenomenal.
When the Atari ST started out, 1 or 2 discs for a game, and that was fine.
Yeah.
And then by the end of the life, long after I'd moved away, by the end of it, there was too many discs involved, and the hard disk was essential. But yeah, for mine,
your 6128, you would have felt like
3-inch disc,
god,
lovely.
Yeah.
It felt a bit rubbish until I got a tape deck. Funny enough, because disc games were an extra 50%. So
even at the Barras.
I don't think you can get pirates for the Amstrad at the Barras.
Okay.
Even for a cassette game, a tenner was 15 quid on disc because they saw you coming.
Yeah.
The CPC was a big success, and it went on to be one not just in its home country, the UK, but also in Spain and in France and somewhat in Germany. It wasn't just a games machine, though. Loads of small businesses in the UK used it because it was perfectly suited for their needs. The 6128 came on quickly on the heels of the launch 464 after a very short period with the 664. Both the 6128 and the 664 had the 3-inch drives, which were in competition and losing with the 3.5-inch drives. I think Sony made those, and they won the format war, but the losing 3-inch format was a cheap buy for sugar in the CPC, and it did the job.
Yeah, quite snide how they did it in Germany, how they released the CPC, wasn't it?
Yeah, the Schneider, yes. Well done. Later came the PCW, which was a sort of a remix of the CPC. It wasn't compatible, although both could run CP/M, and it came with a built-in 3-inch drive, but it was monochrome, and it was really quite suited for word processing and business on a real budget. I mean, this was incredibly inexpensive compared to the other costs at the time, until, of course, Amstrad came out with their own cheap PCs as the PC market went really down in price.
PCW did well. It was very well pitched. Good idea. Yeah.
Both machines understood the market. I love my CPC. It was a brand new world for me, and the only thing I changed about my CPC life is more RPG and adventure games, because there just wasn't very many. The CPC experience tended towards arcadey games, although I did play my first big proper RPG on it, The Bard's Tale, before Dungeon Master on the Atari ST turned my head, and I had to move on to an ST.
Yeah, for me, it was the link between seeing incredible arcade machines on the seafront and bringing them home. So that's what excited me with the CPC. Also, the fact that it was the first computer I ever had. So everything about it was new and exciting. A whole new world, like you say, Dave, without bursting into song. I went to Butlins. I saw Paperboy. I got it for the CPC. I saw Outrun on Weymouth Seafront. I got it for the CPC. I saw the huge and impressive Gauntlet arcade cabinet, which incidentally also turns 40 in October of this year, so around about the same age as the CPC. And I went out and got it for my CPC. So yes, like you, there were text adventures, there were RPGs, but it was about the action games for me.
Yeah. And Gauntlet is maybe the best of those 3 conversions, would you say?
Of those 3, yeah, I got a lot of play out of Paperboy, but yeah, Gauntlet was a good one.
Yeah, Outrun is,
let's not
we know where that belongs.
It.
It's been 40 years since it was made, and the CPC is getting a wonderful thing this year. Last year, I heaped praise on various different Raspberry Pi Pico projects. The Pi Pico is a tiny little device. It's modestly powerful. But most importantly, it's very, very cheap. So it's really inexpensive, and loads of projects have used one of these, usually with some kind of breakout board, some kind of board that acts as an interface between it and the system that they're connecting to. So the creator of Pico Mem, a versatile IBM expansion that does lots of jobs that can be expensive to get the parts for. The creator of this, Freddie, has tweeted to let everyone know that a friend's project of his, Roderick, the Pico CPC, is nearly ready. It already does a great deal, but will do a lot more before it's released in maybe a couple of months' time. And just as I understand, at the moment, it already provides a RAM expansion and allows extra ROMs, which adding ROMs is a big thing for CPC expansions, to extend the operating system. In the future, it will also do disk emulation, hopefully across Wi-Fi, so we can hopefully mount disks over Wi-Fi, which for me is a big deal because getting stuff onto a 3-inch disk can be a bit difficult. So being able to do that with my USIFAC 2 at the moment is how I do it, but this I think might be better. Roderick is the guy behind the project, and he's already made some very refined CPC and Plus expansions in the past. The intended end goal of this project will be an attractive 3D printed shell for it. Duncan will hopefully be able to put a couple of images of past projects up on the screen, which look fantastic and really suit the aesthetic of the machine. So what do you think, Neil?
Great. Anything to do with the CPC is great. I've been using a floppy emulator on my CPC 6128, which recently stopped working. And then I moved to the USIFAC 2, which I think you sent me that, didn't you, Dave?
Yeah,
you did. Yeah. And that works well for me. But for K visitors who want to pick up and play, it's quite confusing if they've never used one, if they don't know the commands to use, if they don't know how to navigate. So we hover around to help people with it. Now, when I saw Freddie posted this on X about his friend's project, I did comment to say, please can you include NFC support? Because I would love to let people be able to get a game from the fake shop. What was that, Dave? Sorry, you just jumped in on the notes there. Did I say something?
Twitter. You called it X.
Oh, yeah, we've got to keep it retro. We've got to call X Twitter, don't we? Sorry. When I saw him post it on Twitter.
Friends reunited, yeah.
Oh, Friends Reunited, yeah. I said, can it have NFC support? Because I'd love for people to go to the fake shop, pick a game off the shelf, just put it on top of the CPC and for it to load. Now, I know that's not an authentic experience, but taking the art of taking the menu off of the screen, and menus can be quite limited on these old systems. For example, on my Div MMC on the Spectrum, it's a great system, but when you're going through hundreds upon hundreds of games, waiting for that screen to refresh to choose the game, you've got to be a little bit patient, or you've got to start to curate lists. So it'd be so much nicer to pull the menu out of the screen, make it a physical thing, and that physical menu is picking up a game and putting it on. Or if you don't have the luxury of a recreated W.H. Smiths in your house, which I know most people don't, a selection of baseball cards. Pick up a baseball card with your who's the chap who does it on the MiSTer, the whiz to tap thingy mabob. I'm completely massacring the name of it.
Tap 2. Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah.
They do it on the MiSTer. And there is a system available on the C64 that you can do it on as well. But there's no point me doing it on one system. I want to standardize it across all of them. So if we could possibly have NFC, it would be great even if it doesn't have NFC. But if there's any way of adding it, please do. And then we can do the CPC, the C64, and then I need someone to do one for the Spectrum. NFC, all of the things, please.
So there we have it. Possibly the ultimate CPC add-on is coming. There's an issue with CPC add-ons in that there's been quite a few of them, but they're difficult to get hold of. And that's not unique to the CPC, but the CPC does have this problem with it. Someone makes one, you can get it for a short period of time, then you can't get it again. And the way that CPC works, you can chain expansions, but that quickly becomes unreliable. So having it hopefully all in a neat little box which plugs into the back will be fantastic. So thank you to Roderick for making this. And Freddie is helping. Freddie, I'm told, is helping. But it's Roderick's project. And hopefully in a few months' time, there'll be a project that we can buy. I will keep people up to date in housekeeping when I hear more, but I'm quite excited about this.
Time now for our community question of the week. And our question this week is, what game do you want to see reported? What deserves to be ported to your favourite system by a team who could have done a better job? Or perhaps a game that was never ported. So this was off the back of our Outrun conversation last week. Are we out of contest mode, Dave?
We are.
Okay. Top answer then. And thank you to everyone for contributing. Lots of answers. As always, this is really nice to see how many people get involved in the question of the week. Top answer is from Tungsten Orchid, who says, Syndicate and Syndicate Wars. I know Satellite Rain exists. It's not one I've heard of, Satellite Rain, but it just isn't scratching that itch. And I don't count EA's Syndicate FPS.
No.
And Dot Matrix Head says the original Syndicate would be great. Yeah, I mean, Syndicate was always a game that I was fascinated by, but it ran a bit jankily on my stock 500. Of course, you could play it on a PC to get a better experience, but user interfaces have come a long way since then. So it would be nice to retry Syndicate with modern improvements. What's the next one, Dave?
It's from Millap64. I would love to see a remake of Mike Singleton's epic strategy game Midwinter. We both love this game.
Yeah.
It captures a feeling in this game on a single Atari ST disc or the Amiga if you play that. Absolutely amazing that they managed to get that on that disc. Mike Singleton, though, is an expert at this. There were plans to do this back in 2015, but sadly the project never really progressed much beyond some conceptual artwork and a basic demo of the skiing action mode. For me, the remake would have to be a very accurate model of the original island map and maintain the same game mechanics as the original, such as the 2-hour time window between status updates. You could, however, include a multiplayer option for others to join and take control of other characters that have been recruited, or even play as the enemy troop commanders. A brilliant game by a brilliant guy that was far ahead of its time. R.I.P. Mike.
And remember, Dave, it was viewed from the perspective of some goggles.
Yes.
Perfect for VR.
Yeah. Midwinter was a game where you were set in an island, a fictional island, where general masters had taken over, and you were the resistance. So you were to travel about, blowing things up, fighting against the enemy, but most importantly,
first-person perspective,
recruiting other people in each 2-hour time window, and you would have these other people do things. And it was very difficult, but it was really interesting.
Oh, third answer comes from Ori Gunner, the original Microprose gunship to the Commodore Amiga. At 16, I was heavily into gunship on the Commodore 64 and got my friend into it too, once he understood it was a simulator and not just shooting at dots. When we both moved to the Amiga, we imagined how amazing gunship would be if it was ported to the much better machine. Then it was announced and we waited, and finally it came out and my friend got it. He didn't wait for me and I got the phone call. This is crap. Oh, he brought it over and we played it. I couldn't believe it. It looked and sounded almost identical. It even loaded. I even loaded it on my C64 so we could see them side by side. Barely better sound, not even digitized sound. While the polygons were now filled in, the frame rate was fairly any better. It was the absolute opposite to mind-blowing. In hindsight, what we were expecting was Gunship 2000, but what we got was almost an identical port of Gunship. So there you go. The original Gunship for the Amiga. Please put Ori Gunner and his friend out of their misery and give them a good version.
This is a common problem, though, for moving 8-bit games onto the 16-bit. How do you make it justify the platform? And for many of the ports, they are objectively better, but feel much worse.
Yeah. I'm just going to read out the next answer because the solution is right there. Okay. This is from DJ Hoffman. He says, I would love to see a better port of Shinobi for the Amiga. The official version feels like it was ordered from wish.com, only especially when, what does that say? Wish.com, only especially when the put of tune title music kicks in. What's that?
Must have been port of the tune title music. Oh, the port of the
tune title music kicks in. If you fancy taking up the challenge, okay, there's the solution. I have the arcade original disassembled into 68,000 source code. I've seen how many sprites it throws around. It won't be easy. Well,
do it, Hoffman.
Yeah, who could possibly do that? For those who don't know, Hoffman has just ported Shinobi to the Neo Geo and is now working on porting Golden Axe very quickly. He's already got the first level working of Golden Axe. And I love seeing games that feel naughty, games that shouldn't be on the Neo Geo, appearing on the Neo Geo, and just the library of Neo Geo games being expanded because it's such a capable machine. I want to see different genres, different types of games, running on that hardware. So keep up the good work.
I feel I should read out Pajaco's one. Pajaco says, Commando, because it's so well worded, Commando on the BBC Micro, the thing we got was a psychedelic flip screen migraine-inducing travesty. And he's put an image of it on there, and it is. It's awful.
Where is it? Let me have a look. Oh gosh, yeah. Wow, it's like neon. It's like, imagine Commando, but everything is neon. Neon green, neon yellow. Wow, that's going to hurt your eyes.
Awful.
You won't get away with a sneaky game of that at school without the teacher noticing. So thank you to everyone who has contributed answers. Our new question of the week then is, what one item from your collection would you put in a museum and why? It could have a personal story connected to it, such as that Manx Nick was alluding to earlier in the episode. It could be that you think it was genre defining or that it changed the course of micro or console history. One item, one piece of vintage gaming or computing history, an artifact that you think belongs in a museum that comes from your collection. That's the important bit.
Interesting.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Have a think. Maybe we'll have some answers. Maybe Duncan will throw in an answer for next week. Until then, thank you for taking the time to listen. We hope you enjoyed the show. Do subscribe if you're not currently subscribed to us. We've passed 10,000 subscribers on YouTube and it's just going up and up. So thank you for all of your support. If you really love what we do, go to patreon.com/thisweekinretro and become an official twirler. Join us on the chat rooms. Join us on the subreddit. All of that stuff. You know the drill. The links are all in the show notes. And see you next week. Thank you for watching and listening. He's waving.
Bye.
Bye.
This Week in Retro was presented by Neil from RMC the Cave and Dave. It was produced by me, Duncan Styles. The podcast version of the show is available through your favourite podcaster, including Apple Podcast and Spotify. And the video version is available on the This Week in Retro YouTube channel.
Join our community subreddit at r/This Week in Retro to suggest and vote on the stories we cover on the show. If you watch This Week in Retro on YouTube, please give us a like and subscribe to help us reach new viewers.
If you enjoy our show and would like to support it, then please check out the link to our Patreon page in the show notes or description. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time for more up-to-date news for out-of-date tech.